Those oh, look at that. What a rookie mistake. So let me repeat that. So you saw me miming, and thanks for reminding. So let me repeat what I just said. So welcome everybody to the stream. I was on vacation last week. I'm back this week, but I was not just lazy, but I built the space shuttle here, and it's a fantastic model. I can only recommend it. So if you are looking for a gift for yourself or for a loved one, I would totally recommend this. It was so much fun building it. I smiled so much when I built it because they built in so many fantastic ideas. And having listened to many podcasts about the Space Shuttle program and having read a couple of books about it, so many things that I heard about and read about, I saw in the model. For example, how they have this speed brake in the tail rudder and other things. So it's really great. But we're not just here to talk about Lego, as much as I would love that, but we're here to talk about coding, which is kind of similar to Lego, actually. And if you have been a subscriber of my channel, you might have watched some of my SwiftUI components videos where I compare SwiftUI to Lego. And, you know, as all analogies, there's, you know, it's a slight stretch, but I think it's true because you take many little building blocks and then you put them together and something bigger is created by putting all those things together. And you can reuse bits and pieces, right? So for example, if you look at the Lego instruction manuals, they often have little mini instructions where they tell you, okay, so you need to take these couple of bricks here and put them together, and then you have like a mini module. And you know, let me show you part of this model. So so for example, you know, those parts here, those pods, these are the orbital maneuvering system, and you can actually take this off, and you have this little thing here which has the exhaust, the engine, and it has, you know, in the model you can't see it, but in the real thing it has two tanks in it for the fuel and for the oxidizer. And in the Lego instruction set, you have 2 or 3 pages where you are told how to build this thing here, and then you build on the other one, which is slightly different because it's mirrored. And then you're told how to put this together and put it onto the model. So this is kind of a module, if you will. And in SwiftUI, we do very much the same, right? So we build things that we can reuse. And oftentimes you only end up realizing, oh, this is something that I can reuse after you've used it a couple of times. And that is why I ended up saying, well, you know, I've built so many chat UIs now because I work on Firebase AI logic, and I have so many demo apps that I need to build where I need a chat UI. Why don't I build a component? Likewise, I always need something to let users sign into their applications. And instead of rebuilding this over and over and over again, I thought, well, you know, why not build this once and for all, and then I can just reuse it in all of my apps, just pull it in and be done with it. And that is what IdentityKit is. It is an opinionated SwiftUI library that I built to make my life easier, and at one point I might make it available to the public. So without further ado, let's switch to the coding part. Oh, and also, because we're talking about, wait, all right, here we go. Because we're talking about identity and signing in, I've got a little poll prepared for you, which should show up now. So I'm interested, how do you prefer to sign in? If you need to sign into a website or an application, do you prefer to sign in using email and password? Or do you prefer to sign in using Google or sign in with Apple? Or do you prefer using email and link sign in? And in the past couple of months, I've had the impression that many websites, mostly, but also apps and services, instead of asking you, hey, can you please choose a password, or can you please make up your mind if you want to sign in using Google or Apple, they just ask for your email, and then they'll send you a link, or they'll send you a two-factor code so that you can then sign in. And it doesn't matter if you've just signed in a couple of days ago or if you're completely new, you always have to go through this process, which sometimes is really annoying because you want to sign into a website and they just say, well, you know, we've sent you a 6-digit code to your email. Can you please go and get it from your email? And then you'll have to go open your email, find the email, and then go and paste it. Which, if you're on the phone, you know, it's easy enough because Apple has implemented this really nice user experience where they will automatically detect if there is a 6-digit code waiting in your messages or in your email, and then they will automatically display it on top of your keyboard when you are in an input field that lets you input a 6-digit code. All right, so, and it seems like at least half of you so far prefer to sign in using Apple. But, you know, take your time, and if you haven't voted, feel free to vote. So let's take a quick look at the application. So I'm in an unsigned in state in the application. So no user is signed in, and now I can either sign in using email or password, email and password, or with Apple. If I don't have an account yet, I can click on this button down here, allowing me to sign up, and you will notice that the button here also changes. And if you've used the Sign In with Apple button before, you will know that it has a couple of flaws, I want to say. And one of them is that you can't easily change the color scheme. So if you change the color scheme of your application, it will not automatically update. At least it used to be like that. I don't know if it has changed. And also, it's difficult to change the title of it. And that is why I built my own one. Not just because of that, but also to make sure that it looks homogeneous with all the other buttons. And you will notice that because now this application runs on an iOS 26 simulator, this looks kind of rubbish because this button up here uses the new design. It's, you know, this is not liquid glass, but it is following the general theme of let's make everything rounder. So this is not round. And, you know, just for fun, we can run it on, let's run it on this simulator here so we can see how it looks on iOS 18. So let's see. Okay, here is our iOS 18 simulator. And I'll bring it up side by side. Nope, I don't want to verify. Okay, here we go. So on this one, I was signed in, now I'm signed out. And let's look at this side by side. So on the left side, it looks much better because this button here and that button here look the same, well, almost the same. But specifically, the corner radius matches because I paid a lot of attention to make sure that the corner radii are the same. But over here, it looks not great because they are different. Let me show you one thing. So account screen, this is the account screen, but we need, let's see. Yep, here we go. So the account button puts a value into the environment, and then in the main application, we have the authentication service. And then on the overview screen, we have a sheet that will be displayed. So let's take a quick look at that. Authentication. So here we have the authentication button, and then we've got the authentication screen. And if we want to support more providers, I can just go in and say, I also want to support Google, sign in, let's run it once more, and then you will notice why I implemented my own custom buttons. Because now this looks very homogeneous, right? So we've got the title here, we've got the icon to the left, and they have the same width, the same height, they have the same dimensions as this button up here, and it also looks great once you switch to dark mode. Once again, let's run this on the iOS 26 simulator. And here, it still looks great, but not as great as it should because it doesn't have the same corner radius. Okay, so, and today I want to work on making this look better. So, one thing that is really annoying in Xcode is that if you work on a package that you also use in your application, that is not really possible. So, for example, if I want to go into IdentityKit, which is the SDK that I use, and edit this, the following will happen. So let's go into the sample here. And let me bring this window up here. Oh, interesting. It does work. That's surprising because usually this does not work. Okay. Yeah, it does. It does not work. That is what I wanted to show you. Okay. So, yeah, here we go. Right? So I have this Xcode window where I have my second brain application, and it has a dependency on IdentityKit. And then I have another application, which is the sample application, which also has a dependency on IdentityKit. But because IdentityKit already is open in the other window, it can't be open here, which is really annoying. So let's close both of these windows and then just reopen it, and now it should be fine. Okay, so, and I should also use my simulator because it's no use if I run it on my own device. Okay, let's build, and then let's run it quickly to verify that I've got the correct code. Yeah, this looks good. Okay, so in preparation for today's live stream, what I did was I implemented a simple view which shows the sign in with Apple button, because I thought, well, surely Apple has gone ahead and implemented a liquid glass version of the button. And as you can see, they haven't yet. So here we go. Let's see, let's make a little bit more space. Okay. Nice. And we don't need that as well. So here we have the sign in with Apple button with the on request and the on completion closure. And let's see if we can get a preview. So I thought, well, they have this sign in with Apple button style thing here. So probably there is something that allows me to say, well, I want to use liquid glass. So let's see. So we've got black and white. And we've got white outline, which is what I mimicked in my implementation, but there is no liquid glass. So let's also try button style, and then say let's use .glass. So that's only available in iOS 26. So we can say, well, this is only available on iOS 26. And now it says, well, I can't build this because probably the build target. Let's increase the build target just for now. So it's still, and even if you tap on it, it doesn't look glassy. And also if I do glass prominent, it doesn't look liquid glassy. And if I remove that, it also doesn't look glassy. Let's try white. Not really. So my original goal was, right, let's have a look at how Apple did it, and then we'll just re-implement that. But they didn't. So, and until now, it looks like, they still use the old corner IDE, which look a little bit out of place. So today we'll work on implementing this ourselves. So let's go into IdentityKit and go into our implementation. Oh, hey Noe, how's it going? So tomorrow, for those of you who might have forgotten since I last mentioned it, tomorrow we will have another live stream with the folks from the Firebase iOS SDK team about Firebase AI logic. So definitely tune in tomorrow. The stream is already staged on the Firebase channel, so you can go there and click on the Notify Me button so you don't miss it. And I just saw that Noe, Alexander Noe, who's my co-host for tomorrow, joined the stream. Hey Noe, it's great to have you. Also, don't forget to vote on how you like to authenticate. All right, so we have our Authenticate with Apple button, and you can see that I do a couple of things here, and one of them is I make sure that this button works nicely if it has the full width of the phone, but also if it is if it needs to share the space with other buttons, right? So sometimes you want to place buttons in a vertical way, and sometimes you want to put them next to each other. That's easier to say. Horizontal, vertical. I always am confused. There's probably a good trick to remember it. So what I do to make that possible is I use view that fits, and this is kind of like a really funny view, I want to say, because view that fits is a view, right? So if we look at that in the SwiftUI interface, we see it is a view, but it has those two children here, and this first part here, that is the part where we try to use as much horizontal space as possible, and we try to place the logo and the text. And then if we can't because there is not enough space, then we'll just use the logo, and that is what we do if we place them next to each other. So that's one thing that I do in this button here. And then the other thing, what's interesting for today, is the social authentication button style, and that is a style implementation. And you can see here that we have this faint outline around the button, and this is achieved by using all of this code here, and that is a button style implementation. So to make it more interesting, what we'll do is I'll place a label here, and let's call it global login, and use the globe. And then as for the height, or we could just use padding. How's that? Not bad. And then we can remove this. Okay, so here is our button. And let's actually try to put two of them next to each other. So embed in a beast hstack, and then see. So there's still enough space for the text, but if I do this, sign in. Ooh. All right. Well, it should have Oh yeah, not here, but in where I use it over here. Anyways, so let's just forget about that. This button itself is not that smart. It's where we use it, where we have the smarts. So, so now what we want to achieve is how can we see how this preview looks like in iOS 26 versus iOS 18, right? So, I mean, I could run this on the phone and I could say, well, you know, I want to run this on an iOS 26 simulator, and I should probably also say our deployment target is iOS 18 to make that possible. Yeah, so this one is, and we'll just return to that. Okay. Okay, so now that I specify that my deployment target is iOS 18 and above, I can choose an iOS 18 simulator or an iOS 26 simulator and run it. So that is what we could do, right? So we could say, well, let's run it on an iOS 26 simulator and see how it looks like. It looks like this. And then go here and switch to the iOS 18 simulator and run it here and take a look at how it looks like. And it looks like this. And even though this starts up really, really quick, you know, the application gets killed on the other simulator, so I would manually have to go back and then open the screen and all of that. And that is just like super annoying. And you know, it's a lot of back and forth. So, and ideally, I want to be able to work on my code and see how it changes in real time. So let's see how we can do that. So let's go back to our social authentication button style and refresh our preview, and then take a look at whether or not we can do that using the previews. So here's our preview, and we can go here and then say, well, you know, I want to see this on an iPad or on an iPhone, and currently we're, you know, it's switched to automatic and it selects iPhone 16 Pro. But there's also this drop down here, the more drop down, where we can see we've got all the other simulators here as well. And we could say, well, let's take a look at how it looks like on iOS 18.6 by selecting this one here. And it should look pretty much the same. So in order to make it easier for us to distinguish, let's add an availability check. If at available, iOS 26, then we want this, and else we want that. Okay. So, and I need to switch that to 18. Right, so now I can see that this code here is being used, and if I switch the emulator back, or the preview back to 26, we will see that. Nice. So, is there a way how we can see two previews at the same time? Well, yes and no. So we could do this and then have another preview down here, and then just say, well, let's put the same code down here. It's a horrible duplication. Okay, so, and now we've got the two previews and we can switch back and forth, right? So that is something that you probably do all of the time if you want to exercise your view in different contexts. You might have one preview where you exercise your view in dark mode and another one in light mode, or maybe you have a list row and you want to show the list row in landscape or in portrait orientation. So that is how you can do that. So, but can you also switch the kind of the deployment target? Let's try. So here we are on 16 Pro with iOS 26. Let's go to 2 and then switch to 16 Pro on 16.6. So this re-renders. It says 18 here. Let's switch back and it says 18 here because this is a global switch apparently. So it operates on the entire preview pane and there is no way how I can change that for this individual thing here. Okay, so that didn't work. There is another thing that we can try, and I'm going to make the code easier to read. Donut asks, hey Peter, is this package available on GitHub? I can't seem to find it. It is. It's still in a private repository. Once I've implemented the sign in with Google functionality, I will make it available for people to start using it. If you'd be interested in taking a look, even though it's not feature complete, please let me know, and I'm happy to entertain the idea of releasing something that is not feature complete and has like a pretty big implementation gap. Yeah, just let me know. Okay, so the other thing that I want to show you what you can do is you can there is a view modifier called preview device, and maybe we can use that. Okay, so there is no shortcut. Preview device, and then okay. All right, so code completion tells us a little bit what might be possible. So let's try that. It didn't work. This doesn't conform to decodable. So what we'll do is we'll just take a look at the documentation and see if it tells us what we can do. Okay, it seems like it's confused because, yeah. All right, here we go. So, a simulator device that runs a preview. Create a preview device by name like iPhone X or by model number like iPad 8,1. Use the device in a call to the preview device modifier to set a preview device that doesn't change when you change the run destination in Xcode. And then to find out which device types are available, we can run this command here. Okay, so these are all the devices that are available on my machine. And let's do a quick search for 16 Pro. So it shows me exactly two entries here, iPhone 16 Pro and 16 Pro Max. And that means it does not take into consideration the operating system. So it is just the phone model itself. I mean, we can give it a try. Probably string literal, I'm guessing. Oh, and then we should, let's use a different one. Let's use a 13 Pro. Okay. Not sure if this works as intended or does not work at all. Let's take another look. Oh, we need to use raw value. Well, let's do that. So, I mean, it's hard to say if it actually takes this into consideration or if it doesn't. I mean, it really doesn't matter, because what we wanted to do is make sure that we can specify the version of the operating system, and that we can't. But I know a way to do it, and you won't like it. So let's first of all remove this, and then add another editor, right? So I can go and click on this plus button here and then say, I want another editor pane below. And now this gets really uncomfortably small, but at least I will be able to use two different versions of the operating system. Okay. So this is 18. And then, all right, so my drop-down has now collapsed into this little icon here. So I can switch to using iOS 26 up here. Right. Nice. Cool. So, and if I make a change, for example, if I add an exclamation mark here, it will automatically update in both of the previews, which is nice. So obviously this works a lot better if you have a large screen. I do have a large screen, but and so that you can see what, that you can still see something. I specifically run my screen on a smaller resolution, or yeah, on a smaller resolution. Okay, cool. So let's scroll this down, because really what I care is just the button here. So I think we've got a couple of ways how we can make sure that we use, or that this button looks like a built-in iOS 26 button. And we're gonna go the dangerous route first, and then I'm going to show you the safer route. So the dangerous route is dangerous because I will just use a couple of if-defs or if hash availables in this code here. And that means I'll have to rely on the fact that Apple doesn't change the look and feel of the operating system with the next release. And if they do, I'll just have to come back and add another case, right? So what I want to do is, so if you look at this here, where we have an overlay, we use a rounded rectangle with a corner radius of 8. So if we increase that corner radius to, let's say, 20, you will see that it becomes rounder. And 20 is probably not enough, but maybe 40 is better. But what's even better is 200, because that will definitely be enough. It's also very brute force, I think. So that means that even if I have multiple lines of text in my button, this will still be a good enough corner radius. And let's be honest, you probably won't have 10 lines of text in your button. And if you do, you have a much bigger problem. All right, so let me double check if we're still on, because my iPad zoned out. Yeah, we're looking good. So that's one thing. And then probably we should do that down here as well. But now we've got both buttons on 18 and on 26 using this new corner radius. So what I'm going to do is I'll create a new view builder to create me this rectangle shape. So func shape returns some shape. So now it says it returns an opaque return type but has no return statements, and this is true because we don't have a body in there yet. So I'm just going to copy this thing here real quick, and then it should be fine. And now I can replace it here and here as well. So it still looks the same, which is exactly what we want, almost. But now we can add our conditionals. So if available iOS 26, we'll return this, and otherwise we'll return a rounded rectangle with a corner radius of 8. And now we can see that up here we still have the very round button, and down here we have a rounded rectangle. Nice. So that is one way to do it. And if we run the application now, it should look more in line with how it should be. So we are on iOS 18.6. We've got rounded rectangle buttons here. Let me run this on 26 simulator. And we should have rounded buttons. And here you go. And also, I would like to point out that when I tap the button, we have this nice fill effect here. And also, it still works when we are in dark mode. Nice. So now I can go into the sign in with Apple flow and sign in. So that is one way to do it. I'll admit it is slightly more dangerous, as I pointed out, because I rely on a bunch, not just a bunch of hard-coded constants, but I also rely on all of this code here to replicate what looks like a button. Well, it is a button. I want to point this out. So it is a button. It is an officially sanctioned API that Apple provides to make sure that we can build our own buttons and then use them without having to write a ton of code over and over and over and over again. So this is one of the advantages of this ButtonStyle API. And if we go into our authentication screen, so where are we? You will see that if we go into our button, it has this button style here. And if I were to uncomment this, and we'd get a completely different style on the button. Looking like this. So it doesn't look like a button at all because it is one of those text-only buttons that Johnny Ive really loved so much. It still works, but it's hard to argue that, hey, this is a button. You know, it literally is just a piece of text that acts as a button. And if I go back and use .border prominent, for example, it looks like that. So if we switch between light mode and dark mode, you will see that it only changes the color slightly to accommodate for the fact that the surroundings are lighter or darker, but it stays the same. So this is not what we want, but it's good to know. Okay, so I told you that we're going to look into two different ways to do this. So let's look at another way to do it. And that is using what I call a router style. So let's go back to our social authentication button style. And what I'm going to do now is I'm going to implement a completely new style. So struct, and let's call it social button style, Shuttle style. And this is a primitive button style, and I'll tell you why in a moment. So every style needs to have a make body function, and code completion is nice enough to fill this out for us. And I think we talked about this in one of the previous videos where I talked about building styles. Implementing a style is very much like implementing a regular old SwiftUI view, in that instead of having your body function or our computer property, we have a make body function. And it receives a configuration, and that configuration contains all the information you need to create the view. So if you look at the configuration for this button here, it says actually it is a primitive button style configuration, and we can go in and take a look at what is available. So first of all, we have a label, and that is a view. Then we have a button role, and button role, as you might recall, for example, can be .destructive, which tells you, hey, you know, the role of this button is destructive, so you might want to render it in a different way. For example, use red. And then we've got the trigger. And the trigger performs the button's action. So that you can use to execute the closure that the user implemented in order to trigger something when, well, that the developer used in order to trigger something when the end user taps on this button. So, so how is this different from ButtonStyle? So if we look at ButtonStyle, you can see that here we have a ButtonStyle configuration, and the ButtonStyle configuration is slightly different from the primitive ButtonStyle configuration in that it also has a label, so no surprises here. It also has a button role, but it does not have the trigger closure, but it has an isPressed Boolean, and that is something that you can use in order to render the view slightly differently if the user is actually pressing the button. And this is something that I am using in our social authentication button style here. So you can see that here we've got the configuration, and here I read the isPressed property, and then if it's pressed, I use a different color than when it's not pressed. Cool. So what we want to do is, in this social button style, I also want to use #available to figure out if this button runs on iOS 26 or on iOS 18 and below. And if it runs on iOS 18 and below, I want to use this one here. And if it runs on iOS 26, I want to use a different style. So let's remove this for a moment. I can just copy this. Okay, so here we've got our conditional. So if we are on iOS 18, we want to return a button using our configuration, right? So we can just pass this configuration onto the button, code reusability, and then we want to use the button style that we defined down here. So the social authentication button style, this. Right? So if anybody uses the social button style and they run on iOS 18, we will just reuse this social authentication button style here. But if they run on iOS 26, we'll also pass in the configuration here, and then we'll use a button style dot, let's use bordered, and then we'll tint it, and let's use .red for now, so that we can definitely see the difference. Okay, so now I'm gonna take this and we're gonna go to our why is this so difficult to see? Here we go. To our Apple button. Oops. .button style, and then we'll use it here. So let's run this and then see how it looks like. Ta-da! So, and this button now, well, it looks extremely similar to this button here, which is a regular iOS 26 button. I think the only difference here is if we were to really measure it, I think the padding might be slightly different, but it looks close enough. So now, also, let's use some of our emojis here. So, let's also do this for the Google button. And then I'm going to go into the sample application and where we use the authentication screen, and then I'll add .google. Also, did you notice that, I don't know in which Swift version they introduced it, but you can now have a trailing comma in a list of items? That is so useful for this situation here, right? Where you might want to just like move them around for whatever reason. So it looks horrible, but it's super convenient. Okay, so here we go. 2 of our buttons, and we can see that we're now using our new style, but we have one more thing to fix, and that is we shouldn't be using .red, but instead let's try primary. Okay, so that looks a lot better. And here we go. Now, you could argue that why don't you use bordered prominent? I mean, let's try, and then you will easily see why, or you will probably see why I didn't do it. So if you use bordered prominent, well, that's one problem here. So we'd also have to make sure that the text is using a different color. But I think, so if we remove the tint, yeah, so this blue really doesn't work well with the Google logo. Also, I think you only should have one button that's as prominent, right? So the blue kind of says, hey, you know, I am an important button. I am more important than all the other buttons on this dialog here, right? So for example, if you have a confirmation button on a dialog, it will be the one that is tinted in the accent color, but not the other ones. So I feel using border prominent for more than one button is not the right thing to do, and that is why I think this is much better. Okay. Also, I mean, that's another thing that I still need to work on. The input validation is very lenient. Let's put it that way. But you know, what I wanted to show is if the form is valid, then the login button here will become prominent, and then the user can tap on that. So I think it's much better to do it this way. Okay. So this is all right. Lars mentions that trailing commas came with Swift 6.1. Wow, look at that! How modern we are. Yeah. I mean, it is like it is. They're useful, but look awful. I think. What do you think, Lars? Do you agree that it looks awful? Or do you prefer the convenience over the looks? I mean, I prefer the convenience. So what I wanted to do is one more thing. So if we go back into the application and to show you what I mean, we'll have to go into the authentication screen. Sorry, into the sample, into the content view here. Okay, so the order of those constants here, of the authentication provider constants, is not relevant, right? So for example, now I've got email, Apple, and Google, and if we look at how it looks like on the screen, it is email, Apple, and Google, but if I move this around, put Google first, then email, then Apple, it will not have any impact. Email, Apple, Google. So the reason why, and you might remember that in the beginning of the stream I said, hey, this is an opinionated SDK, and I get to choose my opinion. So I get to choose what I think is right or wrong. But let me explain. So I think since we are running on iOS, it is highly likely that people already are happy to sign in with Apple, because let's be honest, if you are on an iPhone, you probably are signed in to your iCloud account. I mean, I think you can activate an iPhone without actually signing into your Apple ID. I think that's possible, but most people are signed in. So it is pretty easy to just tap and then sign in. And if you are on a physical device, it is actually pretty easy. You tap on the button, you do the biometric authentication, and you are in. On a simulator, it's slightly more complicated because it always asks you for the password. So because most people are signed in, I think it's fair to say, well, we can prioritize this and make it easy for people to tap on that. And then the sign in with Google button can come second, because most people probably won't be using it. Only the people who also have an Android device or who for some other reason prefer to use signing in with Google. So for me, I often use sign in with Google because for me it's super convenient, because I live in the Google ecosystem as much as I do in the Apple ecosystem. And to be honest, I still find that signing in with Google has less friction than signing in with Apple if you are on a non-Apple device, right? So if you are on an Apple device, sign in with Apple, super convenient, super low friction. But if you are in Chrome, signing in with Apple has a lot more friction, because you will probably receive the second factor authentication code on another device. So it might arrive on your watch, it might arrive on your phone, it might arrive on your desktop, and most probably it will arrive on all of them at the same time. But still, you'll have to say, well, I am happy to use it, and I recognize that this is me, so you confirm that it's actually you, and then you start typing in the code. So it's not terrible, but it's just friction. And that friction mostly isn't there if you use sign in with Google in Chrome, even if you have two-factor authentication enabled. So anyways, coming back to the order, so I think sign in with Apple should be prioritized if you are on an iOS or other Apple device, and other authentication mechanisms should have lower priority. But I think it would look pretty funny if we had the sign in with Apple button, then the email field, and then a sign in with Google button. And taking all the buttons to the very top, and then the email thing at the bottom also looks funny. So I felt like this way it looks probably the most pleasing. But if we disable the email, then you will see another problem that we actually need to fix. And that is this line here. So we don't have an email field, but instead nothing. So login or sign in with Apple. So that doesn't really make sense. So I want to hide this line here as well. So let me go into the authentication screen and find the code. So here we go. So we've got the label, the title label for signing up. This one. Then we've got the email password and authentication view. Then we've got an error view. And then we've got the divider. So, and this arrow view, that mostly relates to the email and password field, but in case something goes wrong with one of the other providers, that will also feed into the error message. So this should always be displayed, but this one should only be displayed if we actually have also the email provider. So let's try it out. Okay, so it has disappeared. What happens if I enable it? It should come back. Here we go. Log in with password, or sign up with Apple, or sign up with Google. So, I mean, at one point I should probably also make sure that the paddings are correct. But for now, I think we're good. So let's go back into stop tasks, into the main application. And since I am using the local version, it should automatically pull it. All right, so we're building. And this looks so much nicer now. So sign in with Apple, Fred Firebase, that's nice. Share my email, continue with password. Now let me grab my password from my password manager and sign in. And here we go. Very nice. Also, something that I worked on yesterday was updating this button here, because if you look at the email app, you will notice that it has a similar look and feel. So I made sure that it looks like that. Also, I made sure that we have the large title and the large subtitle, as well as a title and the subtitle here, which, by the way, looks funny because this really seems to be a bug in SwiftUI. I think it shouldn't look this way. I posted this on Blue Sky yesterday and submitted a feedback to Apple. So hopefully by the time we go into production with iOS 26, this will have been resolved. Or maybe not. Everybody who's trying to replicate the look and feel of the email app will have to wait until Apple releases a hotfix for this. Cool. So let me quickly look at my notes. I think I showed everything that I wanted to show today. So let's end the poll. So can we actually see this on the live stream? So I can read it here. So how do you prefer to sign in? 44% of you prefer to sign in with Apple. 33% prefer to use Google. 22 prefer email and password, and nobody prefers email and link. Well, that's quite interesting. All right. With that, I think we can wrap up. Thanks for tuning in. There will be a stream tomorrow on the Firebase channel. Let me quickly go there and show it to you. Go to the home page. Firebase. All right, here we go. Firebase After Hours number 15. Firebase AI logic with Swift on iOS. And we will have Ryan Wilson and Andrew Hurt from the iOS SDK team. And as I mentioned, Noe, who dropped into the stream a little while ago, will be my co-host. So tap on the notify button, you know what you need to do, and then you will get a notification. Also, if you liked what you saw today, give it a thumbs up, subscribe to the channel. Let me know if there is anything that you want me to look into the next time. I've got a couple more ideas that I'm going to look into in the next times. So one other thing, let me actually go back to this view and then I can show you. So there was this blog post. We can do this because we're in this view. So there was this blog post by Majid a couple of days ago, and I really liked what he did. Let me show you where you can see it. It's a little bit hard to see here, but I'll explain it. So he wants to encapsulate how you call Apple Intelligence, or Apple's foundation model framework. So he has this struct called intelligence, and it has a couple of instructions here, and then there is a generate function. And this generate function does a couple of housekeeping steps first. So for example, it first tries to verify if the user can actually use the foundation models, because they might be on a phone that doesn't have Apple Intelligence built in because it has an old processor. Or maybe the user is prevented from using Apple Intelligence features because they have a mobile device management profile installed that prevents them from using that, because maybe, I don't know, they work in a government agency that says, we don't want you to use any AI features and have any of our business related data being transferred to any servers that we don't know where they are. Or, I don't know, maybe the models haven't been downloaded yet. So that is what this guard statement here does. And it has a very interesting point here. So if the foundation model framework is not available or the model can't be used, this guard statement here, instead of failing, will return the input. Let me, he had a really good, let me see if I can find it on Twitter. He had a really good tweet that, oh wait, I think we can find it out using Open Graph. Let's do it this way. No. All right. Okay. So in that case, let me find his Twitter. Yeah. Okay. Here we go. So, I think this explains it much better. So here, he creates an intelligence, or he creates this struct, and then he calls it and passes in this very short instruction, if you will. Boost protein intake. So if you know him, he has a bunch of apps, and I think one of them is a nutrition or fitness coach. So one of the things that he wants to achieve in the apps is recommending what people should focus on and use AI to give a better recommendation. So the kind of okay recommendation is to boost protein intake, and then the better recommendation is let the AI generate something based on this, right? So it takes this boost protein intake, sends it to the generate function. The generate function tries to figure out, is the SDK available? Can I call the model? If yes, it will start a new session. It will pass this, including those instructions, to the model, and then it will return the model's response. But if the model is not available or the user can't call it, it will just return what he has passed in. So now you might say, well, that sounds kind of like stupid, because why would you return what you passed in instead of, doing something that the model can generate for you. But I think, for some very narrow use cases, like recommending, what the user should do in terms of nutrition, that kind of makes sense. But I think, this way of encapsulating functionality is also useful, for example, if you want to fall back, right? So let's say you have a completely different kind of application, and let's come back to Sophia, our second brain application. So one of the use cases is you are in an article and you want to summarize the article. So there is no way how you can say, well, we'll just return what the user has sent in. That doesn't make sense. So you need to do something. So let's say you are on a device that does not yet support Apple Intelligence because it is too old. Let's say iPhone 13. Now you want to detect, can I use the model or not? And if I can't use the model, you want to fall back, for example, to calling Gemini using Firebase AI logic. Come to tomorrow's live stream. Using this structure here, where you have kind of like it's almost like a command, right? Like a command pattern. You have this generate call, and you pass in something, and then in this generate call, you realize, oh, I can't use this, and maybe you'll even do this before you generate. So there is maybe a call that says, is this provider available? And then if it is available, you can use it. But if it's not available, you just take the next one, right? So that enables you to say, well, I've got a couple of providers. I've got a local model provider, which uses Apple's foundation model framework if it's available. And if it's not available, I've got a bunch of other providers. For example, I can use Firebase AI logic to communicate with Gemini, or maybe I even have yet another provider that lets me communicate with Claude, for example, or with OpenAI's models. And then you can fall back from one to the other depending on circumstances, depending on availability, or maybe depending on cost, right? So maybe you'll say, well, for all my non-paying users, I want to make sure that they can still experience as much of the application as possible. So I want to give them the opportunity to use this feature using a cheap model that might not have the performance that you are interested in for your paying users. And for your paying users, you can say, well, you're a paying user, and that is why I will use a high performance but more expensive model. And this would be a combination of this pattern here, which is a combination of command pattern and facade, and then using a strategy to say, okay, so depending on circumstances, or maybe even on remote config, I'll use the most suitable strategy. So that is something that I want to look into maybe the next time, unless you have something that you'd rather look me into. And if you do, let me know. All right. And with that, thanks for tuning in. I will see you next week.